talk about Remix. This is a super simple start to Remix. And there is a lot to cover. I'm not going to ask you to wake up right now, or to stand up right now, but raise your hand if you'd like to do the air squats again. Okay, great. Now keep your hands up. Raise your hand if you don't want to do the air squats. All right, raise your hand and keep it up. Raise your hand if you don't care. All right, and now raise your hand if you didn't want to raise your hand. Okay, that's your exercise. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, good. I gotcha. Okay, so this talk is a walkthrough of why Remix rocks. Actually, I forgot to remove that part. The last half of my keynote, that was the first half of this talk, and I moved it to the keynote so I could get more people and talk about how great Remix is. So I forgot to remove that bullet point. You already heard why Remix is amazing. So this is not the why, this is the how. I'm going to be doing live coding, how to get started with Remix. It's also a super simple start. What that means is I've got a bunch of blog posts, a super simple start to X, that are like, we're going to remove everything that we possibly can and just get to the core of what we're learning. And so you're going to see stuff that like, why isn't you using TypeScript and stuff like that? And it's because we're just limiting it to the like bare minimum of what you need to get going. We're also not going to be able to cover everything you can do with Remix. But because we have so much time, I think my official end time is 12:10, is that right? Let me just double, yeah, 12:20 is what it says. But y'all want to get to lunch as fast as possible, I'm sure. I stand between you and lunch. But we'll get to a point where I have everything like all building and running. And then I'm actually going to ask you what you want to learn because there's just so much. And so I've got like this list of things that we can get into, and we'll kind of go through some of those things. So the first half is going to be all well, nice and practiced, and then the second half will be like, hopefully I don't screw up. But I want to expose you to the stuff you're interested in. So prepare to actually use your vocal cords at that time to actually tell me what you'd like to look into. I'm not going to compare this to other frameworks. I have the biggest one, like the elephant in the room, is Next.js. How many of you are using Next.js? That's actually a lot fewer than I expected. Yeah, everybody's like, what's the difference between Next and Remix? Last time I used Next for something real was like 4 years ago. I can't really give you much of a comparison, and I can't articulate it very well. And so I'm not going to try. I'm just going to show you why I love Remix so much. And honestly, I wish more people would do that. I mean, comparisons are nice, but let's just talk about why we love things and less about why we don't like other things. Yeah, I'm going to show off the code for super cool Remix. I'm pretty sure that's like that's supposed to be on the previous slide. My bad. Who did the QA on this thing? Gee whiz. Okay, let's get started. That is all my slides. Boom, that's it. The rest of this time is in our editor here. So, first step when making a new Remix project. Well, first of all, I should say that Remix does have a generator. So you can create Remix app and it will create a boilerplate for you and say what platforms do you want to deploy to, all of this stuff. Do you want TypeScript, everything. But for super simple starts, it's better to build it all from scratch so you know exactly what every file is there for. I wouldn't recommend doing this for every project you create, but when you're first learning something, yes, I strongly advise doing this. This is why I teach React the way that I do, where we start with React and index HTML file and use real script tags and everything, because I just feel like it's so much easier to understand where the lines are drawn around what is what. So we're going to start by making a directory called ConnectTech jokes. That's our project. It's going to be jokes about ConnectTech. Actually, maybe not about ConnectTech. But then we'll open up our editor in this project. And I thought that I changed my theme to dark mode because, let's see, night owl, because we checked it and it was easier for y'all to see. So, okay, so the first thing we're going to do is make an npm-rc. So Remix, up until recently, was a paid software. So you would have to pay to get access to a token so that you could install Remix. Remix announced a couple weeks ago that they're going open source, hooray! And so you don't need to do that, but they still haven't actually moved everything over to actually publishing it as open source yet. And so there's just this one little thing we need to do, and that is set the registry where we're going to install Remix run packages from. That's all. So you can forget about this in like 2 weeks when it's all published publicly. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, that you will do when you're building out your Remix project is you need to install some dependencies. So install, and the Remix is a React framework, so we're going to, of course, want React and React DOM. Remix also uses React Router DOM, so React Router DOM. And then we'll bring in, well, actually, that's all we're going to install for the client for right now. Wow, that was fast. Thank you, amazing conference Wi-Fi. Gee whiz. And then we'll install as a dev dependency remix run/dev. And this has got our dev server and all the other stuff. And that's what we're just going to start with for getting started here. Okay, so maybe I spoke too soon and the Wi-Fi just like, oh, you want to be slow, do you? So here we go, boom. Okay, we've got our dependencies and our dev dependencies. So the first thing that I want to do is we want to just get this thing built, right? This is actually something that I typically recommend is as you're starting something new, just get it to a deployable state. That's what your goal is, and then you can iterate from there. CI is one of the first things you want to set up in a new project. So for at least in any project that you're like, yeah, this is going to be real. Like if you're just playing around and like, who cares about CI? Oh, we're going to call this scripts. There we go. So we'll have a build script, and this is going to be remix build. Well, that is easy. So now we run npm run build, and we've got an error. All right, and this is what I call error-driven development. And if the framework is done in a good way, then you should be able to do this. And there are a couple of errors that are not helpful, and maybe I should report that to the Remix folks. But here, the first thing that it's saying is there is an error loading remix config in this directory. That makes sense because there is no remix config. That error could maybe be a little better. But remix.config.js. And all we have to do is module exports an empty object here. We actually are fine with the defaults. It just needs to have the remix config in there. That probably is not necessary, but there it is. Okay, cool. So our next error. It's trying to build a Remix app in production mode. It's missing the entry client file in the app directory. Okay, so let's make dir app, and we'll touch app entry.client. And this is a JSX file. So like I said, we're not doing TypeScript. You should do TypeScript if you care about maintaining something in the long term. But we're just going to do JavaScript because it's a super simple start. Okay, yes? Oh, if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to, but I work way too fast for anybody to follow along. The whole repo and everything is public, and I'll share a link to that at the end. Yeah. Okay, sweet. So then, and thank you for feeling comfortable to interrupt me. I should have mentioned that. Like, this is not the keynote. Interrupt me. It's fine. It's not either. It's not really a workshop either. But like, I'm cool with that. I like being interrupted. Like, say, hey Kent, that was perfect. Okay. Cool, so next error is entry server. All right, so we need an entry server, whatever that is. Entry server JSX. All right, and next we need a route. Okay, route. Root, not route. A route. You know how people say route? Good luck saying root. Yeah, just call it route or root. I don't know. Anyway, here we go, we've got our route. Okay, cool, so now let's try to build. Sweet, it worked, and it built in 237 milliseconds. That's nice. That minified React and all the other cool stuff. So what do we have now? We've got, you know what, that's really small. Let me, we're not going to look at the file system too much, but I'm going to just bump this up ridiculously huge so you can see the file system nice and easy. So here we have a cache that is created by Remix. You can actually configure the location for that, and I configure it to be in node modules .cache. It's like a fancy thing so it doesn't pollute my root, because I hate that. And normally, if I'm going to blow away my node modules, I probably also want the cache to be blown away too, so that's where I put it. Maybe I should just tell them that's where they should put it too. And then we also got this build. So if you look at this, this is very large text right now. But this is our server. So this is what we're going to be running in production on the server side. We have this assets JSON that's describing like where it's going to find different assets on the client. So we've got our manifest and stuff like that in there. It has our routes defined. We only have one route, and that's the root route, or the root. And then we have our public directory here that was also created for us. Inside of there, there's a build directory. So you can put anything you want to in the public directory, and that will be served as a static file. And then it also sticks in this build directory. And so that's why all of these have the /build, because that's how you're going to serve it. Yeah, it's public. That's why it's called public. And in here we have the shared. That's for like node modules and stuff. React is in there. And then we have our entry for the client. You'll notice there's not an entry for the server because this is public, right? And then we have our manifest and our root. So we have code splitting happening magically, and they do it in an optimized fashion, and I'm happy with the way they do it. So that's it. We have Remix actually building our app, but it doesn't actually do anything. If we pulled it up right now, it would just be a blank screen. That is not very useful. So the next thing that I want to do is actually put code inside of these files so I can actually do something useful. So the first thing that we're going to do is our, whoops, that is not what I wanted. There we go. We're going to put some code in for our root. So this is the root component that Remix is going to render for us. Okay, and we're just going to call it app. I stuck in a use state in there just because we're React and we love counters. And here's something that you may not have ever seen or done before. This is JSX, rendering my HTML element. How many of you have ever rendered your HTML element with React yourself? A handful of you? Yeah, this is not a thing that we do very often. But what's cool about this is in my app, I actually have a class name that's controlled by state that I put on the HTML element, which I think is pretty rad. I think, it's for dark mode. So that's pretty cool. We get to render whatever we want to in the head. We get to render what we want to in the body. We get to render all of that stuff. And then all we do is export that component, and then Remix knows, OK, so your root, I'm going to render that on both the client and the server. So then on the client side, we want React DOM, and then we pull in Remix browser from Remix, and that's all that we render. And Remix is in charge of rendering the right stuff and rendering our root app. But one thing that I really like about Remix is that I'm the one who gets to call react-dom.hydrate. And so if I want to do anything else before Remix hydrates my app, like I often will do like dev tools that I preload before I hydrate. You know, if dev tools are enabled, then I preload those before I hydrate or something. Then I can totally do that because I'm in control. And there's no API for it. This is one thing I love about Remix is the number of APIs relative to other things that I've worked with is much lower just because of the way that they kind of invert control for you. And then we also are hydrating the entire document, not just like some get element by ID thing, which is quite nice. So that's pretty much all we do in our entry client. Now our server is a little bit more interesting. So if we go here, we're pulling in React DOM server from React DOM, and then we also have Remix server from Remix. And then we have this handle request, which down here at the bottom, we export as a default. I should have also mentioned earlier, I tend to move around a little bit in the file, and this is a weakness of mine. I'm telling you, like, I'm being vulnerable with you right now. I try not to. I want to be easy to follow, but I can be a little hard to follow sometimes. I can be a little fast. So if you think that you can multitask and do Twitter and watch me, just do Twitter, because you won't be able to get a whole lot out of this experience if you try to do both. OK, so, and I'm not offended if you want to do Twitter. Like, that's totally cool. But I don't want you to feel like, oh man, I could have done Twitter so much better if I'd known that I didn't have to pay attention. OK, so we export this handle request as the default. And this is going to get our request, the response status code, response headers, and Remix context. OK, so yeah, Remix is going to give us all of those things, and our responsibility is to return a response object. So it's telling us what we're creating the response object ourselves, but it's telling us what the status code should be based on the routing. Hey, you hit a route that doesn't exist. That should be a 404. And also the headers. Hey, these routes say that these are the headers that they want. They want this cache control or whatever. And then this remix context is just like a bunch of metadata about like, here are the routes and different things like that. And then I'm the one calling React DOM render to string. You want to do streaming? How do you do it? I can ask you. You know the answer already. And this is another reason why inversion of control is so great, is there doesn't need to be a special API for, you know, node, I don't even know what the API is, like node stream something, 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 whatever. It totally works, and you can do that. Here we're just rendering to string, and you can also modify the HTML if you want to. Like, you're the one making the response, so I'm just going to go ahead and add this doc type HTML thing just for the fun of it. And because Lighthouse tells me I'm supposed to, I guess. Like, what browser is going to be confused if you leave that off? I don't even know. But anyway, we create our own response. Here's the body for the response. We can set the status. We grab all the headers. We copy those and pass those along. Or we could make a copy of these and just add the content type. That's actually probably what we should do. I should fix this. But in any case, we set the headers for our response, and then that gets sent off to our users. And this is like an actual response that you get in the browser. You open up your browser DevTools, type in response. This is the same thing. It's polyfilled for us. And this will work in Node, like within a Docker container or whatever. It'll work in serverless on Netlify or Vercel or Cloudflare workers or anywhere. This code will work exactly the same in all of those environments. That's pretty cool. Oh, and Azure. Sorry, John. Yeah. It works there too. People are deploying over there. So that's actually a really nice feature of Remix, is that it's built to be deployable anywhere. And eventually a service worker. That is pretty cool. OK, cool. So with those things all in there, let's run our build. And oh no, what is this? An error message that is like could maybe be a little helpful. Yeah, actually it's pretty helpful. Remix is imported. It's not listed. Yeah, OK, let's go ahead and install it. Install Remix. We finally are adding Remix regular dependency. OK, now let's run the build again. Uh-oh, what is this? This is one error that actually could be made a lot more useful. But most people are going to be like using the template like generator thing, so maybe not, I don't know. But here, what's going on is the Remix package is actually just like a proxy package. So it just makes it so that you can do imports from Remix and not worry about which sub-package you're pulling that from. So Remix has like a Cloudflare worker package, it has a Node package, an Express package. The one we're going to be using is Serve, because that just comes with its own server, its own Node server. There's one for Netlify and Vercel, like all of these different platforms. Azure, sorry. and then there's one Remix run React package for the client side of things. So it has just like all of these different packages based on where you're trying to deploy. And I don't want to have to import from those specific packages, because one really nice thing about Remix is its portability. And so instead, what we do is we install Remix, and then Remix will proxy those imports to whichever package that you want. The problem is we don't have those packages installed, and so it can't find it. And the other thing is that we need to run a little script after we do the installation to set up that wiring. So the first thing that we're going to do is install Remix run React for the client-side stuff, as well as like the server, because it's server rendering. And then Remix run serve. And with those both installed, then we need to tell Remix, OK, now I've got these things installed. I need you to set up your proxying stuff. So we're going to do npx remix setup node. So we're setting this up for a node project, and that should hopefully make sense. OK, I don't want to do that every single time I install those, so that's because that would be ridiculous. So we're going to go to our package.json, and we'll add a post install script that just does that. So now we don't need to worry about it, and we get the benefits of being able to just import everything from Remix, and that's awesome. OK, cool. So now let's run the build again, and boom, built in 249 milliseconds. I am so glad that Webpack is on its way out. I love Webpack. I love the people who worked on it. I contributed to it. Like, it's a phenomenal thing. But my goodness, is it nice to have 1/4 of a second build times. And it doesn't get much faster or slower than this. Like, my 27,000 lines of code will compile in like 1.25 seconds maybe. Like, what? I'm coding in the wrong language, I guess. Go is fast. It's crazy. Yeah, they're using ESBuild under the hood. Okay, sweet. So now if we run, let's see. I want to just do this in the right order. Yeah, I think the next thing that we want to do, like we still haven't even actually seen our app. So I think the next thing we want to do is have the dev server running. And so if we go back to our package.json, and yeah, we'll put it right here, dev, remix dev, that's nice. So npm run dev, and that starts up two things. Two things are happening at the same time. So for one, Remix is running the build in watch mode. So it's running the full build because ESBuild is just so fast, it can do that. And so this is really nice. I can't tell you the number of times that I've worked with other frameworks where the development and the production were different. And so everything was working fine in development, then I push it to production and everything's busted because they operate completely differently. Remix, it does do a couple extra things during development to make things nice, but for the most part, it's the same in either case. So the build and watch mode is actually writing files to disk because it's just so fast. It's so cool. The other thing that it's doing is it's serving up our app at localhost 3000. So let's pop that open. And there it is. Woo! This is a Remix app. Hooray! And now, what is going on? Anybody have a guess? People have heard about Remix and seen this. Like, this is the mic drop moment. You haven't seen this yet? So, OK, let's open up our network tab and refresh. So we've got two things that we're requesting here. We've got our favicon, which let's take care of that really quick. I've got a favicon right here. We'll just put it right in our, where is my VS Code thing? Right here. What the devil? Hold on a second. There we go. OK, cool. So let's just paste that in our, what? I have it in my clipboard. OK, we'll drag and drop it then. Boom, OK. So now we've got our favicon. That's requested by the browser automatically, so there's nothing you can do about that request. It'll just happen. Woo! OK, but the other thing that we're getting is localhost. Notice anything missing? We don't have any JavaScript on the page. So that's nice, right? Like, what? I thought this was a JavaScript thing. Well, it is. And you, through the power of inversion of control, are in control of whether any JavaScript is on the page. Remember, you're the one rendering everything. And so this is actually really cool because it means that there's no API for saying, hey, I want to hydrate this page, or I don't want to hydrate this page, or whatever. There's no API for that. It's just you can render it or you don't have to render it. And so I'm constantly faced with this with Remix, where the questions that I often find myself asking, how do I do this or how do I do that, those questions just kind of melt away because it's obvious how you do it in just the way that the API works. So I do want to have that counter work. So we're going to import scripts from Remix. And we'll just render those scripts right here. And if I wanted to, I could say, like, conditionally, if is Wednesday, then you get scripts. Otherwise, our app only works with JavaScript on Wednesdays. That would be weird, but it totally would work. OK, cool. So now we're loading our scripts, and our button is working. Hooray. Cool. OK, so yeah, let's see. I guess well, no, I'm going to save that for later. Yeah, let's go ahead and figure out how to run the build, and we'll get a server running so we see what this would look like in an actual production-like environment. So the npm run build, well, technically it actually ran the build for us already. We don't need to do that. And if we go to our package.json now, we just need to have some way to run this node server that's sitting around in here, or this code for the node server, and serve up this public. And because we're using Remix run serve, that's an express server that we can just use. And so we're going to say start script is going to be Remix serve. So this is a different dependency, or a different binary. This is intentional. These Remix scripts right here, this CLI, is coming from remix run dev, which is a dev dependency that you're running locally. Remix run serve exposes the binary remix serve because that's something you want to ship to your production environment. So it's a production dependency. And so we're going to serve the build directory. That's where our server lives. And that server contains all the configuration and everything else. So you don't even need your remix config once you've done the build. OK, so now let's npm start. And we've got our remix app started on that same port, and everything works exactly the same, and it's awesome. Hooray! And you could, like, all that you would need to do at this point is package up the build and the public directory, and then all of your dependencies, your production dependencies, put that in like a Docker container or whatever, and you can ship that up. Cool? And yeah, that's as far as like the rehearsed stuff goes. And now is our chance to start talking about a lot of other really interesting and fun things that we certainly won't have time for everything, but I think actually we'll have quite a bit of time for most of it. So yeah, let me come over here and just show you kind of the outline of what to expect for the rest of this. So we haven't done any routing yet, and I think that's like pretty critical, so I'm going to show you that first. In fact, you know what? I'll probably do most of this in order, because I think it's in order of what is most important for you. Yeah, when we get toward the end, maybe I'll ask you, OK, we're running out of time. Which of these things do you want to see most? So we're going to talk about nested routing. We're going to talk about data loading. We'll look at CSS. That one's pretty cool and pretty quick. Nested, like why nested routing is so awesome. Error boundaries and catch boundaries. That'll be sweet. Actions, so actually data mutations. Validation, yeah, that's cool. And then if we get to it, deploying to fly, but I don't know if we'll get to that part. OK, before I get to all of that, like I said, this is a much more interactive thing. So does anyone have any questions about what we've done so far? OK, feel free to interrupt me as we go if you do have questions. It always freaks me out when people don't have questions. Like, oh, good, because like either you all get it and you don't have any questions, or you don't get it and you don't have any questions, and I don't know which.
How much of this could be done just with like remix docs opened up on the side? How much of this is like stuff that you from trial and error have?
Yeah. So everything that we've done so far could be done with a single command from Remix, just like create a Remix app. Yeah, building from scratch. When I first created this material, what I did was I said, OK, Remix, create me an app, and I saw what they did. And then they do more than what I'm doing here. Yeah, and this is the way that I learn stuff too, is I'll say, OK, what if I had nothing to scaffold me or anything? Sometimes I'll take a generator and then I'll remove stuff as much as I can until I got even the core. So like another thing that I thought about removing was the remix run serve and just doing like a straight up HTTP server. Yeah, you can tell me later if you would have preferred that. OK, cool. So let's do our first route. We're going to make an app that's actually here, really quick. So there's this site that I just love, icanhasdadjoke.com. Why didn't the number 4 get into the nightclub? Because he is too square. Okay. Some of these jokes are stupid. Velcro, what a ripoff. OK, that one's good. Bravo, Velcro. Yes. So we're going to re-implement a simple version of this app in the time that we have left. And yeah, and it's going to be fun. So what I'm going to do here is we want to have a home page, right? And we'll have an about page, and then we'll have our jokes side of the app. So I'm going to make a routes/index.jsx. So actually, the JSX extension is important because we're using ESBuild under the hood, and ESBuild will not let you use JSX unless the extension is either JSX or TSX. It took me a second to get used to that because I think the JSX extension is stupid. But I use TSX anyway most of the time, so. And I thought the TSX extension was stupid too, but I don't know. The ESBuild is good enough that I don't mind too much. So, OK, so for our index, let's do export default function, default. There we go. You got to spell it right, otherwise it doesn't work. Index, I like calling these screens. So this is our index screen, or maybe route, I suppose. Maybe I should call it route. Okay, and we're going to return a div, a die, and then h1 that says, hello, you. And yeah, let's just go with that. Sweet. So with that, we'll start up our, that was our production server. Let's start up our dev server. We'll just leave that over there. If things aren't working, like if something's broken, I'm like, oh shoot, what happened? Remind me to look at this, because it normally will tell me what's wrong, and I just forget. So say, open the terminal. Okay, cool. So let's go over here, and we'll go here, and here it's still saying this is a remix app. Hooray! It's not saying hello you. The reason is because in our root, this is the first thing that's rendered, and there's nothing in here that says I want to render my children routes. Okay. And so what we're going to do is I'm actually going to get rid of this useState nonsense and this remix app nonsense. And we're going to render an outlet here. And the outlet is going to come from remix. Okay, so this is my parent route saying this is where any children should be rendered. Okay, it's kind of like scope slots a little bit, or like transclusion. How many people know what I mean when I say transclusion? Well, we got OGs, yeah. John is laugh crying over there. Okay, cool. So there we are. Hello, you. Hooray! And now we've got our app actually running and working. It's awesome. So let's make another route. Let's say about.jsx. And we'll just copy this. We'll call this the name actually doesn't really matter all that much, but we'll change it anyway. About route. About us. And you got to add the exclamation point, otherwise it doesn't work. Remix only is there for happy developers. I'm just joking, but nobody laughed, so it wasn't very funny. Here, let's go to one of these. There we go. It's only a murder of crows. There's probably cause. What? Crap. I don't know. A beekeeper was indicted after he confessed to 2 years of stealing at work. They charged him with embezzlement. Okay, thank you. Good. Okay. So yeah, we've got our about route working, our home route. Let's add some navigation. So I think I want to have the navigation on every page, right? That makes sense to me. Remix has this concept of layout routes, where you can say from this route that's basically only in the file system, it's not represented in the URL. Here's the layout that I want, and then all of my children are going to be rendered under that. It's actually a pretty neat concept. It makes things really flexible. But for us, I think we could just probably assume that literally every single page is going to have the same header and same footer. So we'll just put it in our root, and we'll go with that. That's actually what my site does, is it just puts the header and footer right in the root. So we're going to do a nav, and what? There we go. Why am I formatting? When I save, Prettier is going to fix it for me. Okay, so then we'll do, just kidding, that's super annoying. Okay, so actually we want ULs, UL, there we go, and LI. We got to be accessible. And so let's have a link to home, and you know what, let's make that a link, because I'm going to copy paste stuff, and we want to have as much useful copy paste as possible. There we go. So we'll have home, and we'll have about, and then we'll have our jokes. And here's about, and here's our jokes. Okay, cool. And so now that's going to be on every page, except link is not defined. Thank you, Remix. Forgot to bring it. TypeScript makes this way easier, by the way. Oh my gosh. Part of me thinks we should just switch over to TypeScript right now, because that will not be the last time that happens. Okay, cool. So now on every page, we're going to have the nav. And we don't have to worry about that for those children routes. They don't care. It's irrelevant to them what is in the parent. That's great. I like that. We don't need to make some sort of reusable layout component or something. If we try to go to jokes, then it's like, oh, something unhandled thrown response. Oh no, that's not good. So that's because we don't have a jokes route. So let's go ahead and add our jokes.jsx. And we'll do basically the same thing. We're getting some repetition in here, so you'll remember this better. Jokes. All right. Jokes. All right, sweet. Then we come back here. Jokes, hooray. Cool, so that's a little bit of nested routing, but for the jokes route, I also want to have well, let's see. We'll do the further nested routing here in a second. I want to have some jokes, like some jokes rendered out in here, maybe a random joke. So what I'm going to do first is we need to have our data. So we're going to call this jokes.js right there. And I'm going to go and borrow these because I don't want to have to do this manually. So here are our jokes. Yeah, we've got a bunch of them. You can read them as we go. But they each have a name, content, and ID. And so with that, now I need to bring these in. Now, we could just import those, right? We've got our jokes from jokes, right? We could import those and just use them. But then the jokes, all of the jokes are loaded into the browser. And that is not great because we could have like a bajillion jokes. I don't know. That seems like a fun thing to me. And so we don't want to do this. We're not going to just import all of the jokes and use them in our jokes route. We're not going to do that. But we will use those jokes. Actually, you know what? It just occurred to me that we need to do this a little bit differently. So we're going to actually tell Remix, hey, I've got some code that I only want to be loaded on the server, period. So we're going to have a jokes.server.js. I was about to say TS, but boy, starting to cry now. I'm pretty sure it would work. I'm pretty sure it would work. Yeah, it should get dead code eliminated. I'm like 90%, you know what? We're just going to go with that. I'm like 90% positive it's not going to load all the jokes if we do it, what we're about to do. So let's just stick with that. It'll be easier anyway. If you want me to later, you can ask me, how do I do this like server-only file? And I'll do that. It's pretty easy. Yeah, so the next thing we're going to export is a loader. And this is an async function that accepts a number of things, request, and our params, and a couple other things. We don't need those for right now. All that we're going to do is I'm going to get a random joke. So random joke from math. Oh, shoot. Yeah, it's going to be jokes, math.floor. I copied this from Stack Overflow just yesterday. Math.random times the jokes.length. I think that's it. Is that right? Any Stack Overflow people in here? Pretty sure that's right. OK, and then we're going to return. We could just return the random joke like this, and this will actually work. But I don't like doing that. I like being explicit that this is a response that is going to be JSON. So we're going to bring in a JSON helper from Remix. And we'll wrap this in JSON. And with the JSON helper, I also can customize all sorts of things. Oh, yeah, like headers, status text, like everything that you normally do with a response object, you can customize here, which is quite nice. In particular, the cache header is useful. Though the cache header might be less useful for a place where we're randomly generating a joke every time you land on the page. But it's cool that you have that flexibility, and the API isn't a Remix API, it's a web platform API. And so again, the better you get at Remix, the better you get at the web. That's cool. OK, so this is what Remix is going to load when we land on this route. And so to get access to that, we're going to use loader data. And yeah, let's go ahead and we'll just console log, well, come on, our data. And we'll come back over here. And we got to, use loader data is not defined. My goodness. Give me TypeScript or give me death. OK, there we go. There's our data. And it has our random joke. Ta-da! Sweet. So let's render out that random joke. I'm not going to force you to watch me type that out, though. So we're going to just go to here and copy this stuff. Don't look at the rest. Spoiler alert. OK. There we go. And let's stick that right there. Here's a random joke. Data.random joke. Sweet. So I'll come over here. Ah, for crying out loud. Why don't skeletons ride roller coasters? They don't have the stomach for it. How many people like riding roller coasters? Yes, y'all are my friends. I love roller coasters. I mean, those who don't, you're still my friend, but like, you're my roller coaster buddies. OK, cool. And then we also rendered this link here to a route that we don't have yet. And what's interesting here is because of nested routing, I don't need to build up the full URL to the link. So I want this link to be /jokes/joke ID. And here we're in the jokes route. And so I can just say directly what the ID, and it will append that for me automatically. Nested routing for the win. Woo! So that's nice. OK, cool. Let's get rid of this console log. And I think the next thing that I want to do here is what happens if there is an error. So like random Joe. And we come in here, and we've got this uncaught exception, and it's telling us about error handling in Remix. So let's handle this error. Because we're not using TypeScript because we live on the edge, I guess. We're going to say function error boundary. And here, we're actually going to get the error as props. So we can console log, or console error, I suppose, our error. And then we'll return, and that's just useful for like us. This will also run on the server if there's an error at server rendering time as well. So it can go into your logs. That's nice. But we'll render div. Uh-oh, I did a whoopsies. And now we come in here, and now we get to control that. But again, nested routing, right? So the rest of the app still works. I don't have to think about the rest of the app still working. It just does. I can go to jokes. Oops, it broke. And I can still use the rest of the app. That's great. I like that. Thank you. That is super. So that's error handling. You don't have to do any error handling in your regular component. You're just like, happy path, hooray. All error handling happens as these extra exports. I like that a lot. OK, cool. This is fun. Woo! All right, everybody stretch up really high. Over to one side and over to another. Sorry, I just needed that. Here we go. We got another 15 minutes or so. And yeah, that's good. Your brain needs blood. Wow, doesn't that feel good? It feels good, right? Like it's just a simple thing. You should do that throughout the day. Just every half hour or so, just stretch. It feels good. OK, great. So the next thing that I want to do is let's do a nested route to get to this specific joke page. So we'll add jokes / and then $ joke ID .jsx. So there are a couple ways to do these routing. Let me bump this up again. So doing a folder with jokes, that's going to be a / in the URL. Okay? Doing this $ is going to be a param. So just dynamic thing. It's like, yeah, wildcard, and that's what it's going to be called in our code is joke ID. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a way to escape this. Not today, but there will be with like brackets, I think. Yeah, you can't. I don't think that you have like a ton of control over the like really fancy regex within the file system, but within the Remix config, you can do manual routes. And I actually or manual route, yeah, like they're programmatic routes. And I actually use that in my app to have test routes. So I have a directory called test routes that has the ability to log in as any user for my tests. And so I don't want that in production, of course. And so I only enable that in my Remix config dynamically if the node env is not production. So if you really want to screw my website up, figure out how to get my server to change its node environment variable to something other than production, and then have at it, I suppose. I suppose I could have like a post to build step that deletes that folder. Yeah, that would be a solution. There you go. Pull requests are welcome. OK, so we've got this joke ID. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention about the routes is you can also, what this is going to do is it's going to say this joke ID route is a child route of the jokes. And so jokes is going to be responsible for rendering the outlet here. And that's saying this is where all my children should be rendered, is within this outlet. So let's bring that in before I forget. And so this is where it's going to render that joke ID component. If I didn't want to have the rest of this stuff, like I didn't want to have jokes or anything else on the page, then like that's where child routes are like, oh man, what a bummer. Like I wanted it, but now I don't like it. So there's actually a way to sidestep that as well, and I do this for my blog. So if you go to kentcdodds.com/blog, and then you click on one of the blogs, or one of the posts, you'll notice that it's still /blog/post title, but it doesn't have all the extra stuff from the blog, and that's because you can say jokes.jokeid.jsx. And so what that will do is it says the jokes is still in the URL, but this is not a child route of the jokes route. So pretty cool. Yeah, I'm a really big fan of file-based routing. It's the way that I organize my React projects anyway, and so it just makes total sense that the entire ecosystem has moved kind of to that. Okay, cool. So if we go here, I gotta bump this down again. Let's copy this and put it in here. We'll say this is our joke route, and we'll just say I am a joke. Haha. Whee, there we go. Okay, so we've got our joke, we've got our outlet, and we come in here and we say hippos, I am a joke, hooray. But I think that's kind of odd to have like your this random joke right here, and then we're going to render that joke again, right? So I think it would actually make more sense to have a random joke at the root only, and not have it for the children. I don't want it to appear when I'm on a specific joke, right? Actually, I'll show you how to avoid that here in just a second. I think the problem will make more sense after we get the joke loaded in here. So let's bring in a couple of these things so we can load that joke in. I just had some serious deja vu. Have we done this before? No? I remember you shaking your head like, have you? You know how that happens, right? It is so weird. I'm sure there's science behind that, but that was creepy. Okay, so we've got our joke. This time we actually have params, right? Because this is the route param, so we're going to use those params to get our joke. So we'll say find, and then this is our J for joke. So we'll find the one that has the ID with the params joke ID. So that joke ID property comes from our file system there. Yes, I know, that makes TypeScript kind of funny. But there are ways to make that a little bit nicer, just a little bit. It's kind of annoying. You pretty much should do assertion functions for stuff. That's the way to solve that problem for realsies. And then you have just really nice error boundaries, error handling for those assertion functions when things aren't working properly. So that's how you do things with TypeScript. And probably the way you should do it with JavaScript anyway. Okay, sweet. So this isn't a random joke anymore. This is our joke. Okay, so we found our joke. And now we're going to render out basically the same stuff that we're rendering here. So we'll just take this. We're not going to have a child route on this one. And here's your joke. And actually, we also want to have our loader data right there. So and we'll use data.joke.name. And instead of random joke, this will just be our joke. So here's your data joke name joke. And then we can call this the permalink. Yep. Is that how you spell permalink? Yeah. Okay, sweet. So now we come back over here, and it's busted. Here we go. I messed something up. Oh, right. We're in a directory down, so we got to go directory up. There's actually, when you're using TypeScript, there's a way to make these slashes a lot nicer too. Okay, cool. Sweet. So now here's our random joke. We're showing dinner, and if I click on dinner, now we're showing the same joke twice in a row. So that's why I don't want to show the random joke on the same page as the actual joke, because then that's stupid. So, and we don't do stupid things. So we'll come back in here, and I'm going to take this random joke stuff. We're going to remove it, but I do still want to have a random joke, so we're going to add an index route. And this is our child, and it's the default child. If there is no extra stuff, then it's the default of what goes into our outlet. And so let's just grab, this one would be easiest. And we'll stick in what stuff we had there. Probably put this in all in a div or a fragment or something. Okay, cool. And now we're going to need to get that random joke loader stuff as well. So let's just grab all this. And again, it's another directory up. We've got a random joke. And from here now, we actually don't need the data anymore. But we can keep the error boundary there. So this will handle errors for any of our children. So let's leave it there. Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, cool. And if we wanted to, we could add an error boundary here as well to have an even more in-context error message, if that was what you were looking for. Okay, uh-oh, I did a whoopsies. Outlet is not defined. For crying out loud. Oh, man. I don't know how people live without TypeScript. I just don't get it. If you want to, you can explain it to me later. Come find me and say, this is how I live without TypeScript. I'll be shocked. I'll be amazed. You're better than I am. Okay, cool. So there's our dinner joke. And if we go back to the main page, we get an oopsies. What did I do wrong this time? Data is not defined. Well, what? Oh, right. I forgot to bring in the data use loader data. Maybe I should have done all this in TypeScript. Would have saved us a lot of time. Okay, cool. So now we have our random jokes on this page, and then we can go to a specific joke. And yeah, things work great. Hooray! Okay, so that's nested routing, that's data loading and stuff. We've got 7 more minutes before you want to get off to lunch. Here's the little tip. If you don't want to wait in line for lunch, then I can let you go right now. Or you can just leave. Or you can stick around and we can talk about data mutations. So, who wants data mutations? All right. Those of you who didn't raise your hand, you're either too lazy to raise your hand, that's fine. Or you can just feel free to go and get first in line. I won't be offended. I'll just look at my screen so I can't see you. And so you can't see me as I'm crying. Okay, so I want to be able to add a joke, don't you? Like, I think that would be cool. I want to add my own joke. And so we're going to add a new .jsx under the jokes route. And in here, you know what? Just trying to think of how much I want to show you and how much I want to code for you. I think we'll probably be okay. So we're going to make a new route. And here, I'm going to need a form. And for this method on this form, this is going to be a post. And it will post to the current URL. And I'm going to handle that. Whoa, xcont. That's a mix between const and export. That's what that was. Const action. And this is also an async function. This will receive the request, and we do need the request because we're going to be making a post that has, you know what, I'm not going to type all this out. You've seen people type out forms before. You've done it millions of times yourself. We don't need to do that. So, wow, there's a lot of extra stuff in here I'll have to remove. But we're going to grab all this. We'll just stick it all right here. And then I'm going to change this to a lowercase form. Spoiler alert. We'll get rid of this on change for now. We'll just do, yeah, no errors for now. I probably won't have time to talk about errors. And that's okay, because you can look at it. It's all open source anyway. And also the default value stuff. Man, there's so many cool things I could show you. Yeah, you just have to try it out, I guess. Okay, cool. So we've got our inputs for the name and the content. And so for our request, we want to get that body. So this is going to be our body request. This is going to be await request. Remember, this is a fetch request. So look up the docs. How do I get the body out of a remix request? Go to MDN. Don't look up the remix docs. It's request text. And how do I turn that into a form? I actually forget. I always copy it. It is, yeah, URL search params, because that's how forms are encoded. As URL search params. Cool, so now we have our form, the properties of our form. We're going to have the name is form.get name. And actually, you know what? Let's just make that a property of a joke. So our name is going to be the name, and our content will be form get content. And then we've got our joke, and now we just need to add that joke to our jokes here. So let's stick that there. And if we had a real database, I could show you some really cool things with Prisma and stuff. And I almost did last night, but I was like, no, this is a super simple start. So this jokes is an array. We're going to say jokes.unshift the joke. Oh yeah, I was going to implement delete first. Oh well. Okay, so we're just mutating this array, right? This is our database. And yeah, then we can just return. Or actually, what we want to do is once they've created their joke, we actually want to send them to the page for the joke they just created, right? That makes sense. And so our joke also needs to have an ID. And so what we're going to do is just math.random toString 32-bit and slice off the 0 dot. There we go. So there's our ID. It'll generate a random ID for us. There you have it, UUID package. Just kidding, use UUID, this is not good. Okay, so now that we have an ID, we can actually return a redirect, which is another utility, but all it's doing is making a new response. So let's just do that, why not, sure. You know what, I don't want to, because you have to set headers and stuff. Redirect is nice. But that's all it's doing, is it's making a response. So let's import redirect from remix. And then where we want to go is jokes, is it jokes? Yeah, /joke.id. And that's where we're going to send them as soon as they make a new one. Okay, I hope that works. Let's go to joke/new. I would add a link, but we are limited on our time. So here's our name. What's a joke? Chicken joke? Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. Mind your own business. There you go. All right, and uh-oh, I did a whoopsies. We got to figure out what I did wrong there. Request text is not defined. What the devil is that about? I don't know, actually. Yes, maybe. Here, let's go see what this is why you do it ahead of time. Oh, I gave that variable a different name than I'm using over here, I think. Yeah, I called it body. Thank you. You called it. Okay, let's do that again. Okay. And this time I'm going to be like, blah, super funny, LOL. All right, there we go. Bam, there it is. Mutations, hooray! And like, I didn't have to do anything with synchronizing with use effects or even race conditions. If I hit that add button a million times, that would have been fine too. Remix manages all that stuff for you, and it's all declarative. Look, it's declarative. Look, I've got a form. Oh yeah, and this isn't even a JavaScript form, so that was a full page refresh thing. Now, if I wanted to do like inline error messages or anything like that, then I just add a capital form import there, and now it'll all be client-side. Magic! And then, yeah, I've just got 30 seconds. One other cool thing that I didn't have a second to show you is you want to do validation, of course. You can do that in the server, and then you're like, oh, I want to do that in the client too. You take your validation logic from your action, you put it in a function right up here, and then you can use it in both places. Yeah, that's great. I do that on my site, and it's fabulous. So yeah, that's everything that I had time for. I will push up the finished version on my GitHub, so you just look on my GitHub and you'll find it. But thank you. Feel free to come and talk to me. I'll be at the whole conference, and I would love to give you all these remix stickers and stuff and whatever else you want. So thanks, everybody.